Atlantis, a word that sounds like both a legend and a warning. It appears in oral traditions, in the corners of old bookstores, in textbooks, novels, and documentaries. But the earliest known written references come from the works of Plato, who used the story of Atlantis to speak about morality, politics, and the fate of humankind. That's why the tale of the sunken city has a dual nature. It is both a narrative about a people who might have existed and a metaphor for reflecting on power, ethics, and decline. As we begin this story, it's important to remember Atlantis is not just a question of where or when. It is, above all, a question of why. Why do legends endure for centuries? What do they reveal about ourselves? And why do we continue to seek them? We encounter Atlantis through the words of Plato in Timaeus and Critias. He presents the story as a tale told by Solon, the great Athenian lawmaker, who supposedly heard it from Egyptian priests. In Plato's accounts, the city is described in rich detail. Concentric rings of land and water, a temple of Poseidon at its center, great wealth, laws, and a powerful army. But Plato is not merely recounting a chronicle. He is constructing a moral parable. A people who had everything lose what is most precious due to inner corruption. When we read his lines, it's important to view them as a literary and philosophical epic. Every description is a tool meant to teach the listener. This does not diminish the curiosity about real-world traces, but it sets the tone. Atlantis reached us through a narrative crafted with a didactic purpose. Plato paints a detailed plan of the capital. Concentric rings of land and water, fortified walls, bridges connecting the sections, and a central hill crowned with a grand temple adorned with ivory, gold, and silver. Let us imagine this space. Streets leading to the sanctuary, canals with boats gliding through, public squares where people gather, workshops bustling with artisans, markets glittering with goods from distant lands. This city's geometry is not just aesthetic. It symbolizes order and power, centralized organization, and the idea of harmony between nature and culture. Each ring represents a level of access, of status, while the water layers emphasize mastery over nature. This city is an architectural manifesto, pointing to a high level of organization and engineering thought in Plato's narrative. According to the account, Atlantis had a complex social structure: rulers, priests, warriors, craftsmen, and merchants. Plato mentions laws and order that initially made the society strong. Families had defined roles in preserving tradition, crafts were passed down from master to apprentice, and priests safeguarded knowledge and rituals. Yet within these details, we also glimpse potential tensions, privileges for the elite, centralized authority, and growing inequality. These elements are familiar to every civilization, and it is precisely in them that Plato saw the seeds of eventual collapse. When mechanisms of power cease to serve the common good, they begin to nourish institutional flaws. Imagine a craftsman carving an ornament for the temple, a mother teaching her child the traditions, and a judge delivering a verdict beneath the shadow of stone columns. And the city comes to life before us, human, layered, and complex. At the center of Atlantis's pantheon stood Poseidon, god of the sea, who, according to Plato, bestowed his protection upon the city. The temple at the island's heart was a sacred hub where priests performed rituals, reaffirmed social norms, and prayed for good harvests and safety at sea. Religion was not merely a spiritual practice. It structured time, the calendar, ethics, and politics. Processions, sacrifices, and festivals shaped collective identity. Priests guarded certain knowledge in secrecy, which reinforced their influence. Through religion, the people's original unity could gradually become a tool of control. And this, Plato emphasized, was a potential mechanism of moral decay. Imagine a ceremony at dawn's first light, voices rising, drums echoing, the scent of incense in the air, and the city seems to come alive in one grand ritual. Plato describes Atlantis as a wealthy and advanced economy. Metallurgy, stonework, textiles, agriculture, and trade all flourished. Canals and harbors enabled the development of vast trade networks, bringing goods from distant lands, while merchants forged international ties. This economic efficiency provided the resources for art and religion, but it also carried the seeds of inequality. The surplus of resources became concentrated in the hands of the elite, while the cheaper labor force remained vulnerable and dependent. Imagine a night when ships arrive laden with spices and metals, and while one part of the city celebrates, another labors late into the night in workshops. The economy of Atlantis, like that of any great state, was both a driver of culture and a potential source of conflict. According to Plato, Atlantis possessed a powerful navy that allowed it to project strength across neighboring lands. Ships, symbols of maritime dominance, served both as tools of trade and instruments of war. Notably, it was this naval power that enabled the Atlanteans to interfere in the affairs of other nations. The fleet conquered, defended, and elevated the pride of the state. But such power comes at a cost. The military elite gains privileges, resources are diverted toward armament, and the peaceful fabric of society begins to lose its balance. Imagine the shipyards where warships are launched into the sea, commanders studying maps to make strategic decisions, and young men marching off to campaign. And we begin to see how naval strength becomes the very essence of the state. As a state grows, so too does the risk of internal imbalance. Plato describes how, over time, the elite of Atlantis came to identify themselves with the right to determine the fate of others. How the pursuit of excessive luxury began to erode the virtues that once held the society together. Laws that once preserved order gradually began to serve the interests of a narrow group. This is a classic drama of history. When social institutions cease to serve the common good, the people lose their inner strength. Plato uses Atlantis as a cautionary example. Where order turns into tyranny, religion becomes a justification for ambition, and growing opulence marks the onset of moral decline. In such a climate, external threats and natural disasters take on fatal significance, because the society has lost its capacity for unity and the moral will to respond. Plato's account ends in dramatic fashion. One day and one night of earthquakes and floods that completely swallowed the island. The description is brief but striking. The earth split open, buildings collapsed, and the sea engulfed streets and temples. In a literary sense, this is a moment of reckoning. Pride and violence meet the force of nature, which does not tolerate injustice. For us, modern listeners, it's important to see this episode as a symbolic turning point, where material greatness, without a moral foundation, proves fragile. But it's also worth appreciating that this part of the narrative was preserved. It serves as a reminder that even the greatest civilizations are vulnerable, both to natural forces and to their own internal weaknesses. According to Plato, the story was preserved by Egyptian priests who told it to Solon, and he, in turn, passed it down until it reached Plato. Such a chain raises questions. How does a tale change from mouth to mouth? Across centuries and cultural barriers? Oral tradition is a living entity. It enriches itself with details, takes on contemporary hues, and sometimes loses chronological accuracy. Plato worked with this material like a sculptor, selecting elements, adding meaning, and transforming it into a lesson for his own time. That's why modern scholars have to read his texts with a dual approach, both as a source of folklore and as a philosophical treatise. Memory is unstable but powerful. Its force shapes what we call history. After Plato, Atlantis traveled through the centuries. Renaissance thinkers and artists found inspiration in it for paintings and poems. Later centuries turned it into a subject for researchers and explorers. The 19th and 20th centuries added a romantic and adventurous aura, from novels to newspaper sensations. In the 20th and 21st centuries, Atlantis penetrated cinema, video games, and pop culture studies. It became a symbol of a lost utopia, a model of an ideal society, and a warning. Art transformed the silent legend into a living metaphor about power, collapse, greed, and hope. The The search for Atlantis has become both a science and a sensation. Since the age of great geographical discoveries, seekers and dreamers have imagined a continent hidden beneath the waters. From amateur hypotheses in the 19th century to modern oceanographic research, the history of these quests is rich with discoveries and mistakes. Sonar, underwater drones, and ocean floor mapping have revealed strange structures that fueled interest but often turned out to be natural formations or archaeological artifacts from other eras. Understanding this history helps distinguish scientific research from sensational interpretation, while also highlighting one truth: the human thirst for discovery is relentless. In the mythological archives of humanity, stories of great floods, lost cities, and peoples perishing in the waters often appear. Babylonian and Sumerian epics, the biblical story of Noah, legends of the Maya, and Pacific Island peoples all echo similar narratives. This points not only to shared human fears, but also to how natural catastrophes can be etched into memory and become the foundation of myths. Atlantis is part of this vast network of myths about loss and remembrance. But myths do more than preserve memories of threats. They also provide communities with tools to reflect on morality, responsibility, and renewal. Atlantis lives not only in the depths of the sea or in the archives of libraries. It lives in our collective imagination. It serves as a mirror. In it, we see both dreams of perfect societies and fears of their downfall. In times of change, climate challenges, and geopolitical upheaval, the story of a city that lost itself through internal corruption and nature's wrath sounds like a warning. But it is also a call to action, to build institutions that can withstand the test of time, to remember the moral duties that come with power, to honor memory and learn from it. Atlantis is not just a question of geography. It is a question of responsibility toward the future.